sometimes this format, it's a little hard to see people who've raised their hands. And so if for some reason we're not recognizing your hand being raised, go ahead and chime in.
Yes, 100% support that. Yep, I do. I have learned to have the participants list open so we can see hands. So hopefully we're mitigating for that. But yes, please do speak up if we're missing you. Okay, this is a quick look at the agenda this morning. Jason and I are going to take a time to try and address some hot topics and frame this work in an accounting systems type of frame, which I think might be helpful for us. Jason will run through tier methodologies, which we actually haven't talked about a lot in this group, but they are an approach. The tiers are an approach toward methods and selecting methods that are recommended in the IPCC guidelines. So Jason will dive into that. And then we're going to spend some time just talking a little bit more about the two inventories, the one we're crafting, the Land-Based Net Carbon Inventory, LCI for short, and DEQ's Sector-Based Emissions Inventory, SBI for short. So, and then we're going to spend most of the time on more land category approaches today on cropland and grassland / rangeland. So we should have plenty of time for discussion, I hope. Alrighty, let's dig in. All right, my notes. So really, we have been talking about our two work streams, the inventory that we're setting up and the NCS related work, where we're going to talk about strategies to remove carbon on the landscape and what we can account there and metrics to do so. And really, these two work streams are two types of accounting systems to track change over time and to help meet the voluntary goal that will be established by the Commission in the spring. So the statute directs the state to track in two ways, through the inventory and through natural climate solution implementation. And these two types of accounting have names. The inventory is considered allocational accounting, and the NCS work, which is outcomes-based accounting, is called consequential accounting. And this will help us do our work across the board. GHGMI is working on the allocational accounting. Well, of course, the contractor, I think that we just finalized the contract for today, will be working with us on outcome-based accounting. So because I'm a fan of analogies in bookstores, I'm gonna try and do a bookstore analogy. So bear with me. Inventorying books in a bookstore is a type of allocational accounting, and doing so tells you the contents of the bookstore. And after repeated inventories, relays trends information. But this type of accounting does not tell you what activities to take to increase your revenue, right? So creating a metric in this analogy, the metric being dollars earned, and selecting strategies to increase your revenue is an example of consequential accounting, which we have yet to embark on together. The strategies we will select together that have metrics to increase carbon, ecosystem resilience, and community wellness on the landscape is coming next, right? So I don't know if this is helpful. It was helpful for me. I'm going to put a very technical link in the chat that GHGMI has put together as a blog on their website. And if you are a weedy type person, take a look at that blog. I think it was really, really super helpful. It may not be helpful for you, maybe too much, but in case you like the weeds, I wanted to offer that. Okay, so Jason is going to speak next and kind of dive into the tiers, which is related to the allocational accounting. Jason, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, so focusing in on the allocational accounting aspect of what an inventory provides, we wanted to take a moment to talk about how the methodologies are crafted in each land category. And so previously we've talked about wetlands, forests, and settlements, and today the project team is going to be talking about croplands, grasslands, and rangeland. The project team is building methodologies based on appropriate data and methods, which then have an associated methodological tier per definitions provided by the IPCC. And so these tiers kind of serve as shorthand to help us understand the kind of detail and results that methodologies may provide. And understanding the tier methodology also helps us understand where and how we can improve the inventory in the future. And so you'll hear the project team to speak to this a bit more today. And so again, these tiers represent different levels of methodological complexity, accuracy, and uncertainty. And in general, if you look at the arrows on the bottom, complexity and accuracy generally increase from tier 1 to tier 3. And the goal is also to reduce uncertainty from tier 1 to tier 3, although this may be complicated by selected methods and data. But overall, the goal is increasing the accuracy and better estimates of uncertainty. So tier 1 on the left there, methodologies employ default emission factors and default estimation methods, which are generally available in IPCC guidelines. These data are not country specific, and the methodology may not be sufficient to capture most land management activities. Tier 2 is one step up in complexity and accuracy, and hopefully with less uncertainty. These employ emission factors based on country-specific data where proven to be more accurate than IPCC defaults. This tier requires national data and research results to justify methodological decisions. Estimates generally reflect country-specific characteristics of land cover and land use, and they may capture some land management activities in the aggregate, such as like forest management on federal land. Tier 3 on the far right there employs an empirical or process-based estimation model, along with detailed data specific to the country, which may even be specific to the state or regions within a state, where proven to be more accurate than tier 1 or tier 2 methods. Tier 3 models are more sophisticated and complex than the emission factors in tiers 1 and 2, and the goal is to provide a greater accuracy for estimates and lower levels of uncertainty. Tier 3 methods may also capture more land management activities than the other tiers, such as changes in forest management on state lands, but that depends heavily on data availability and model sophistication. And so this may have been a little more in the weeds than you might have needed, but we wanted to clarify this and brief you on why we may be talking about some land management activities and things that are associated with activity metrics and inventory. Next slide, please. So this is kind of an example of how the methodological tiers are organized within like inventory documentation. So tiers are generally specified for estimation of emissions or removals from each source, category, and gas. And there may be different tiers and methods for categories and subcategories, even by greenhouse gas. So there are differences within categories, which you'll see in this table here. We may include some land management activities for some categories, for some subcategories that use tier 3 models, but not other subcategories that use tier 1 or tier 2 emission factors, which you can see here, and the difference between the tier 3 and the tier 1 methods on the right. Increasing tiers is recommended to improve accuracy for categories that contribute the most to emissions or removals or are changing the fastest. These are often called key categories. Our contractor and the project team are working to provide detailed documentation of inventory methodologies, and we'll be working to think more about how to improve the inventory and the different tiers of methodological analysis in future inventory analysis. And so these improvements may include moving from tier 1 and tier 2 emission factor based methods to tier 3, like tier 3 models, or improving tier 3 models to include more land management practices. So I think that's all we need to come up with this.
So we'll thank you, Jason. We'll pause here, let that soak in. That's a lot of information. And we brought it up for two reasons. You've been spending a lot of time with us, like giving us wonderful data ideas, where to find data, who to talk to about data. And that has been so that the project team can decide to understand what data is available and what information is within that data set, and to be able to kind of judge and apply. Can we do a tier 1 for this subcategory? Can we do a tier 2? Do we have enough detailed data to do a tier 3? Because that's what we're, that's what we're aiming for. That's what the state would like to do. The state would like to get to tier 3 plus in the future. The point is to try and get most accurate information so we know what's going on in the landscape. And then I had a second point that I have forgotten. Shoot. So pause here to see if you have any questions about tiers. Oh, also, second point, you'll hear the project team as they're talking about methodologies today. I don't know if it has happened previously when they're talking about methodologies, but Robert and others, I'm unsure who's speaking today, may say tier 1 on the slide, or like, this is what we can involve in this methodology. And so just wanted to provide that frame for you so it didn't kind of fly by. Okay. Any Any questions? And it will also sink in as you're listening and learning today, using croplands and grassland rangelands as an example. Okay. Not seeing any hands. Next slide, Jen. Nothing in chat either? No. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, our last topic before we hand it to the project team today is to address kind of the questions about overlap in the sector-based emissions inventory, SBI, and the land-based net carbon inventory, the one we're working on, LCI. And this has been actually quite a task for the project team, and they have done a stellar job at kind of sorting through the nuances. So the slide focuses on emission sources, right? So the sector-based emissions inventory focuses on emissions. And so really the potential for overlap is in emissions in subcategories. And so to the left, the table lists the emission source and where we might find that, developed land, agriculture, cropland. And then we list the explicit emission subcategory in the table, which the team needed to figure out. Is that going to be in the land-based net carbon inventory? Is that already accounted for in the sector-based emissions inventory? Pulling up my notes. So the most complex, so as you can see, ta-da, yay, there's not overlap, which is fabulous. The most complex conversations we've had to date involve fertilizer accounting. Under IPCC guidelines, any nutrients added to soil on cropland, synthetic, organic, or crop residue should be accounted for in the sector-based inventory, and everything else is should be in the LCI. The only deviation from this in Oregon right now is the landscape, the land-based synthetic nitrogen fertilizer which is accounted for currently in the sector-based inventory. So the team has identified that, and we're not counting it in the land-based net carbon inventory since it is accounted for already. And Odo and DEQ, Elizabeth Elbel, was she able to join us this morning? I forgot to look for her name. Yay, Elizabeth is on.
Yes.
Yay. We're going to continue talking with each other to see where it makes sense in the future to hold that one subcategory. So that is about as far as I can take this table. And the project team and Elizabeth are on for questions and further explanation if I have missed something that they would like to bring up. Olga or Elizabeth? Oh,
Liz, Megan has a question.
Oh,
Yeah, we also have 2 hands. Yep.
Okay, great. Megan.
I'm wondering why agriculture and cropland are separate here. It looks to me like most of the ag practices are actually cropland applications. And yeah, curious about that.
Good question. Olga?
Yeah, I can take that.
Great.
Yeah, Robert can add on too. But yeah, there's sort of, again, there's some rules about where things get counted. And the agriculture sector typically involves emissions related to livestock, to fertilization, to manure management, to agricultural residue burning. So all of that, all of those activities which have annual emissions are typically counted under the agriculture sector, if you will. And so that is consistent with the IPCC guidelines and with the national inventory. And in Oregon, that is under the sector-based inventory as well. Now, cropland is called that because we're looking at the land sector. And so we're primarily interested in understanding how soil carbon changes as a result of different management practices of the land itself. So we're not looking at any of the livestock activities or anything like that, and direct emissions from that. We're looking at how the land, like the soil itself, is changing in response to different activities. So that's why that's kind of the demarcation line.
So if I might repeat that, just so I understand too, Olga, that agriculture is a nomenclature used in the IPCC guidelines for sector-based emissions inventory kind of work, like where they're paying attention. And cropland is the nomenclature used under the technical term LULUCF for the land use change forestry part. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So a difference in nomenclature, really, more than anything else, used in these big, huge, complex guidelines. Okay.
If I might just add, some of the ways that I think about it is that the agriculture category is what you do on the land, and the cropland is what happens on the lands, right? So you think about it, you're applying fertilizer, you're applying urea, and then what is happening in the soil is part of the cropland. I don't know if that helps, but it helps in my mind a little bit in how I think about it.
Thank you, Robert.
Jocelyn has her hand up.
Yes. I was about to start going down the line here. Jocelyn?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to recognize, I think this is useful for the group here, but it's a good chart. And I think if you are going to publicly post this, it would be good to reinsert the other agricultural emissions in the SBI, such as enteric fermentation and manure, just so that the public understands where it sits, that it's not being ignored. I guess my other thought was to clarify, the SBI only does emission sources. Is it accurate that it does not do sinks?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so in that case, will the LCI do sinks in dairy, such as enteric feed additives to reduce enteric emissions, or manure-based compost to sequester more carbon in the soil?
No, those are things that will still be that should show up in a sector-based inventory if they're if they're reducing overall emissions from that category as a result of these changes, then it will just show up as a lower emission in the SBI.
Okay.
Really good recommendation to kind of like show the holistic view of the two inventories. I appreciate
Liz,
that.
do you want to just reference the document you sent out on wood waste, which doesn't quite show up here, I don't think.
To that, the document we sent to the advisory committee. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Jason,
Just that's out there, and
Yes.
folks can.
Yes, totally. Jason, if you could manage. We haven't. I'm not sure it's gotten to a link yet. So when there is a link, we'll share it. But Caitlin, our comms person, was working on setting that, getting that up this morning, since we just sent it out last night. Ellen, question.
Yeah, so going back to what Megan said, all those agricultural practices are on croplands. Is this table just for internal use, or are other people going to be looking at it? Because if they are, they're going to be confused by seeing a separate category called cropland. So I don't know if you can just call that cropland soils or something to make it clear why it's not part of agriculture.
Okay, I mean, that's a good, thank you for that. I think we're trying to stay as close to the IPCC lingo as possible, and so that's why it's reflected here, but understood that, if the IPCC lingo is going to be confusing to folks reading the inventory report or related things, we can work on that. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And previously, and I've lost track of where it's being counted, frankly, is tractor use for tillage and all these other operations. Is that being captured? I think DEQ is capturing it and some other thing, but somebody who's reading this table is going to be wondering about emissions from using fossil fuels in tractor use.
Right, so you're talking about like the emissions associated with the combustion of the fuel and the
Yep.
equipment. Yeah.
For tillage, all kinds of things.
Right.
Tillage, all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff.
And I think that question does come up a lot, and it is in the sector-based inventory, but I think this feedback on trying to expand a little bit of the agriculture part of this table might be helpful because those questions are common.
Okay, it's good to hear.
That
you.
also came
And
up
if I
last
may-
time in forests.
Okay, great. Okay, good to know. And we'll note.
Liz, sorry.
Yeah.
This is Alyssa from
hello,
JHMI. Hi. Hi, everyone. And that question is a very good one to help put into context the sector-based fossil fuel consumption with energy generation. So tractors, cars, airplanes, fossil fuel plants, that should be captured, is expected to be captured under the energy sector. So all that mobile machinery and off-road machinery should have a line with the energy sector. And then that helps not have double counting too. But obviously you can further clarify that it may be happening on agricultural and croplands.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, so tillage then goes in agriculture then, is that correct? So that should be clarified because that's obviously probably the hugest use. Also, I had a couple other comments. Why is there no CO2 listed under burning? Got C4 and N2O. Certainly CO2 is a major emission from fires. And also then I wondered, how do you put in inventory the additional development on these working lands that are non-forest, non-agriculture related? How do you track them out?
All good questions. Who from the team would like to tackle them?
I can start. Yeah, so I guess this table, I see it as mainly internal because it just helped us sort out where there could be potential, areas where it's not so clear. This does not by any means represent the entire, list of emission sources that are being counted by either inventory. So yeah. That full context is of course important, and that is potentially the source of confusion here. So yeah, Liz and Jason, I'm happy to discuss further in terms of what do we want to do with this table moving forward.
Yeah, this is good feedback.
I would add one thing. What I see, I've been working in the Oregon land use system for 45 years, and it's becoming leakier and leakier. And we're adding more and more uses to the farm zone that reduce our ability to store carbon and also increase the greenhouse gas emissions. And I think it's very important to include that in there. The thousands and thousands of houses and et cetera that are being built on this land and commercial uses.
Yes, no, and that is actually, so again, because this table does not include everything, only a small subsection where we're paying extra careful attention to ensuring, we're not double counting or skipping something. That's why it's not showing up here, but the land-based inventory includes the entire land area of the state, and it's separated into major land use categories like forest land, cropland, wetlands, grasslands, rangelands, and settlements or developed land. And so when forest is lost or cropland is lost to development, that loss of biomass carbon is certainly accounted for when we are able to track that transition. That is also connected to why you don't see CO2 emissions from burning. That is because they are accounted for, the losses in carbon are accounted for in tracking kind of carbon stocks on the landscape. And so when biomass is burned, we see the decrease in carbon stock from forest or grassland, let's say, and that is already telling us that that loss is an emission. And so the additional accounting is for just for methane and nitrous oxide gases.
Thank you, Olga. What I'm hearing is that a table like this expanded would be really helpful, just with X's for each inventory. And so we will work with the team on that.
So additional follow-up. So on methane, but that's a reduction in carbon stocks also. So is it like double counted or single counted between CO2 and methane?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Those are separate gases, so they have like different methodologies for accounting, and they're counted separately for, and there's no.
But it would be part of the carbon stocks with CO2.
So the carbon stock emission is, results in this. The carbon stock loss shows up as a CO2 emission, but then there's also additional emissions of methane and N2O.
Right, and that doesn't really get at my question. Methane is part of the carbon stocks.
Wouldn't it be a carbon flux?
Right. So I think, Mike, what you're probably trying to get at, and Olga, is that overall, when there's gases exchanging, like emitting, whether that's CO2 or methane or N2O, that helps get to the balance of emissions and removals gives you a net carbon flux. So you calculate emissions related to those gases or removals related to CO2, and then you get a net carbon flux. So they're not double counted, Mike, or they're not, but they are all considered to get to what's happening on the landscape. Is that the question? Or
maybe I can jump in. This is Katie Goldman, and I'm sure Olga could also explain it, but I'll give her a break and see if I can help as well. So let me just, first of all, a point of clarification. Are we talking about methane in the context of burning? Are we talking about it in a different context? Is the question about burning specifically? I'm not
Well,
sure.
that's what my question relates to.
Great.
Yes,
Then
but,
the answer is easier. So in that context, methane is actually a trace gas that gets emitted as a result of combustion. So there is a carbon molecule. So that's probably what you're seeing is the connection there, but it's actually a separate source of emission, not related to the carbon cycle. It's a trace gas. It's actually a relatively small amount of methane per amount of CO2 that gets released. Same for nitrous oxide, but for complete accounting, we include them.
and I guess I won't belabor this, I guess, but I don't understand. They're all derivatives of cellulose and lignin and so forth, which are your stored carbon. And so then they're all being emitted at the same time, and they're both carbon coming from the same source. So I don't really understand why the separation, but that's fine if that's the way you're going to do the accounting. Yeah. But
I think it's the easiest way to do it. With nitrous oxide, there's no carbon molecule there, but I understand the source of confusion. I guess we just look at it as a separate trace gas, and it's relatively small, like I said. So tracing the molecules down to that level might not be necessary for the accounting. I don't know if that helps. We can also work on a more complete answer for next time.
I think, yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you. My mind went to the fact that, methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and so they're like the math just diverts as those gases are released. And so I don't know if that's even part of it, but that's where my mind went. So I'm Dean.
I'm wondering how far back in the life cycle of these things the accounting goes. So for example, urea fertilization, CO2 emission, I'm assuming what that's looking at is as the urea molecule gets mineralized into ammonia, then CO2 is emitted in that reaction, but it's not counting the CO2 that's emitted when nitrogen fertilizers are produced industrially. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, not in this inventory, but that would be accounted for under, and Alyssa may know the exact economic sector, but it's either industrial or energy sector. I think it's industrial.
Okay,
But
that
it
makes
is
sense.
accounted for somewhere else.
That
And I
makes
would
sense.
just to kind of add for any of that production that's occurring within Oregon. So we do have at least one facility I know of. We have those emissions in our sector-based inventory. But obviously, there's product that's produced outside of Oregon that's imported here, and the emissions associated with that production are not included in our sector-based inventory.
Elizabeth, those would be included in the consumption-based inventory, is that correct?
Yeah, so the emissions, yes. So the consumption-based inventory is where the emissions associated with the products used in Oregon would be captured. So I don't know exactly what line item in that inventory. That would be a David Alloway question, but that's where those would show up.
Thank you, team. Jonathan.
Thanks. This is kind of going back to the materials you shared, and I just, without going back and rereading them, was just wanted clarification on where pile burning in forest harvest, et cetera, fits in. I thought it was in some ODF model, but I just wanted to have that verified, clarified.
Yeah, so this is in the burning rows. It says wildfires and prescribed burns. So those would be captured there. And prescribed burns include broadcast burns, underburns, landing burns, as well as pile burns.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, we're echoing ODF's kind of lumping there too. Like, so that's how they put those things together. Excellent. Okay. Okay, so I think we've heard for Jason and I, and next steps in the team is to either footnote, I think I saw Jonathan's chat, and or just work on creating perhaps a really helpful appendix in our reporting would be a full-on table describing all the subcategories and where they fit in each inventory, so that people not only can see where they fit in each inventory, but they have a holistic view of all subcategories included that Oregon is tracking. That would be a very long table. So we'll work on that. But if it's necessary, it's necessary. So work with Elizabeth on that. Is there anything else that the team would like to mention? Elizabeth, is there anything you would like to mention before we move from? Are there any chats I'm missing? I have the participant list open.
I was going to say David Mildrexler has asked why are harvested products not part of this table? And again, I think that was just answered by Liz. We'll provide a more comprehensive table of all of the different gases and in particular activities that will be included in the inventory as soon as we have all of the materials available to us.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. Last chance. Next slide, Jen. Thank you, everyone. That was a really good discussion and helpful as we continue to try and figure out how to communicate clearly. The project team is up, and they're going to be talking about cropland and grassland and rangeland today. And so I welcome Olga and team to take it from here.
Thank you. So is Jen sharing the slides?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
No problem. I'll start us off and just give a quick overview where we are and some background, and then I'll pass it to the rest of the team to talk specifically about the methodology approaches. So yes, next slide, please. I will give you kind of a reminder about the timeline of the project and where we are. We will, we aim to share the methodology approaches for your consideration and input, and then get additional input on identifying data sources or resources that could help us refine the methodology, and then, of course, discuss any questions that might arise from the presentation today. So that's the goal for today. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the timeline. This is an incredibly fast-paced project, and we broke it into 2 phases. From July to September was the first phase, which we sort of wrapped up, included primarily kind of developing the approach, identifying all available data sets that we could apply that come from the state especially, and kind of going through a round 1 of stakeholder consultations, based on that, drafting the inventory methodology. So now we moved on to phase 2 of the project, which will be from now until January. And we are currently deep in the inventory compilation and kind of refinement of the technical manual, which basically documents the methodology that's being used to produce the estimates. And as we're doing that, we're going to be kind of have started round 2 of stakeholder consultations to, iron out any remaining questions on the methodology, as well as start sharing the preliminary results in weeks ahead. Following that, there will be a public webinar to share the preliminary results, and then based on all the feedback that we receive, kind of finalizing the inventory data, inventory results, inventory report, and then finalizing the technical manual, which will then the state have to be able to continue doing this kind of cycle in the future. Next slide, please. So I think this slide should look familiar. Oh, yeah, there we go. We may have used it in the past to kind of explain what the inventory is and what it isn't, and where kind of our scope, the scope of this work ends and, others start. The blue line that you see shows what an inventory ultimately will look like. It goes back to a particular year. In the case of Oregon, we will be starting the inventory in 1990. And it shows kind of the overall sum of all emissions and removals that have occurred within the set boundary. Then what is shown after, to the right of the dashed line, is what can occur when the state sets targets, reduction targets, and you can then project out what may happen in the future as a result of implementation of particular mitigation approaches, or emissions that continue to occur if nothing is implemented in terms of climate reduction goals. And so, like, you could potentially see an increase in that inventory emission line, which is shown by the red segment, or a reduction shown by the yellow segment. But what the inventory and what we are focusing on right now in this project is looking at what has happened to date so far. So back looking and estimating emissions that have already occurred for each year. Next slide, please. So to kind of, to circle back to the questions that we just discussed, I wanted to remind everybody what the land-based net carbon inventory is meant to include. And that is emissions and removals from all of the land in Oregon. Land is separated into categories that are, used. These categories are broad, but are kind of distinct in terms of the type of vegetation and the type of kind of soil dynamics and management characteristics that they exhibit, that they are separated that way. And this is consistent with the IPCC guidelines and also consistent with the national inventory. So we have 5 major categories that are listed here. Forest land, which includes, all the land where you have trees and other woody vegetation. You have cropland, which is, land that's used for cropping or forestry and perennial crops as well. Grassland includes rangelands and pasture lands in the state. Wetlands are lands that are covered or saturated by water, and we're including coastal and tidal as well as inland wetlands in the inventory. And developed land, those are the settlements and all the urban areas that were mentioned that certainly may lead to losses of natural areas, or in fact they do. And we're looking at kind of what carbon and non-CO2 greenhouse gases may be occurring, or emissions that are occurring on those types of lands as well. There's one more kind of category, which is called other land, which doesn't typically exhibit a lot of emissions or removals. That includes kind of sand, rock, kind of areas, ice. And so that is part of the full accounting of the landscape in Oregon. And it's important because we always want to make sure that all the land is accounted for in the inventory. It's not listed here because, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of carbon fluxes that are happening on those types of lands. And so in order to make sure that we're not double counting or undercounting something, we're following the IPCC guidelines, and we're looking at the national inventory as well, which follows this in consistent with the IPCC guidelines, to ensure that we are properly accounting for various emission sources where it's not always clear like where they should be. So there's kind of a well-established set of rules that we're following, and there's usually some logic behind it, even though it may not seem like it. And so if any additional questions arise about where things are accounted for, we're happy to address them. Next slide, please. All right, so I
had a question before you go on too far. I think it was mentioned just a few minutes ago, maybe by Jason, but where do the actual crop that changes as the season goes on, take a wheat crop, for example, when you have the wheat and the straw in the field, you've got a huge inventory of carbon. And then when it goes to market, you don't. And how does that work?
Okay, maybe we'd hold that for just a second, and because that's Mike is a perfect tee up for what I'm going to talk about here in just a second.
Yeah,
I will wait then. Thank you.
works for me.
That's a great idea. Good question, Mike. And thanks for piping up because I missed your hand. So, okay.
Great. Well, why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide? So we're going to talk about cropland now. And really, we're going to break this into 3 parts. We're going to talk about the data, the emissions factors, and then the methodology. And so when we start talking about the data that we need, what we're really trying to do is we're answering the what, where, and how questions. So for example, what crops are grown? What are the rotations? Where are they grown? How many acres are grown? What soils are they on? What agronomic practices are implemented, such as cover crops on orchards or vineyards, fertilizer rate and timing? When are the crops planted? When are they harvested? All of that is kind of the baseline data that we need to be able to create the inventory. And so what you're seeing on this slide here, especially in the top part, is where we're getting the most of that information. So we get a lot of it from the U.S. Geological Survey, which has information on land cover, and we'll see that a little bit more in the next slide. They also have information on county level nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer use. USDA has information on the actual acres by crop type, the planting and harvesting date, many of the agronomic practices, and then the soil type soil survey geographic database, or SURGO, tells you the type of soils that you have. But that doesn't give us the whole picture on everything, especially around ag, because there's so much nuance in there, and you can't get all the data. And so we routinely rely on agronomic experts to help us try to figure that out. And so I want to say thank you to Dean and to Andrea, both are here on the call today, for helping us make sure we got our brain around and we're thinking right about the detail of this data. So then, when we do this, we take this data, which is that first line there in the bottom table, and we take that and we use it to create emissions factors, which we'll talk a bit more in the upcoming slides. And then we use whatever methodology we can to be able to get as specific as we can on the calculations. So where we can do a tier 3, we go for a tier 3. If not, we work backwards from there. It's a tier 2 or a tier 1. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And what you're going to see here in this slide is here is the coverage of the data. So this is kind of where we start with. This is where we're looking at where are what's the amount of cropland that's out there? What's the land that stays as cropland or has been converted to cropland or converted to other uses? And that helps us figure out the overall inventory at a very high level. Now we go on to the next slide. And this is where we start getting into the data and the detail. So for 11 of the largest crops in the state, we're able to use a tier 3 model. And a tier 3 model is based off of a USDA document called the Methods for Entity Scale Inventory. And so this is a document that is it is peer reviewed, it is developed through USDA, but each chapter is led by leading scientists in the area. So there's a section on a chapter on grasslands. There's a chapter grasslands and rangelands. There's a chapter on croplands. There is a chapter. I can't remember all the other chapters, but there's all kinds of chapters in this. Then those methods are then put into using the biogeochemical model called Comet Farm, and Comet Farm is a user interface that allows you to take all this information, has all of the back-end calculations to be able to get you the various soil carbon information for a given area. So to be able to run this, we need to have, as I said earlier, acres harvested by crop, the planting and harvest dates, fertilizer, crop yield, tillage, and the cover crop types in acres. And so all of that comes together and allows us to create the soil carbon calculations. So Justin, the reason why the fertilizer is in there is that we're looking at the soil, we're looking at the carbon nitrogen cycle. So we're looking at what is happening within the soil versus what's going onto the soil. Let's go on.
So, sorry,
Yes.
just to
Please.
ask, so the state the SBI does not include emissions from fertilizers, or I'm just trying to understand how we will make sure that we don't double count.
So SBI handles the emissions of nitrous oxide with respect to fertilizer use on the fields. We're using the fertilizer information to figure out what's happening in the soil. So one way to think of it is above the surface and below the surface, or actually more specifically, in the air versus in the soil. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you would need an X in the LCI box then or at least some sort of clarification. I don't know. It seems like a nuance, but I think what you're saying is when you apply it, there's emissions from that moment in time, but then later there's more emissions or sinks. Is that it? In the soil?
That's correct. That's correct. And you're looking at over time.
Can I just add one quick thing, Robert? And you've done a great job explaining, but it might help for people to understand that the model running behind Comet Farm, it's called DayCent. It's actually modeling the carbon and nitrogen cycle in the soil. So for the model to work, we need to tell it what the fertilizer application rate is, and it will output an N2O emission result. But we are not necessarily interested in that result for our inventory report. We're interested in the soil carbon result. So it's an input in order for the model to run, but it's not intended to duplicate or double count across the other inventory. Does that sound right to you, Robert?
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that's actually kind of a great build on to answer Catherine's question is that the DayCent model, which is behind Comet, only looks at cropland systems, while the methods document from USDA does include quantification from forestry. If we could go on to the next slide. So this here is talking about what crops can be modeled in the system. And so these 12 crops are what have been modeled. There's enough data that DayCent can go ahead and use it. And these are 11 of the 27 largest crops within the state. We recognize, there's 40,000 farms in the state and 220 different products. We're trying to get to as many of them as we can. At some level, there's a limiting step as how far down of all the crops we can get. But we're trying to get the major crops as well as the rotations. Now you notice there's 12 listed here, and there's 11. It's 11 of the largest crops. I'll answer the pears in a second, Mike. The one of those on there that is not in the top 27 produced crops is ryegrass, according to the data. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. So basically, this is just summarizing everything. I think we've talked about this. We're looking at the most common crops, the crop rotations in every county, using all the conservation practices, so things like enhanced efficiency fertilizer, tillage practices, cover crops, all of that goes in, and out pops the other end are the emissions factors for those 11 crops that we've got. So we'll continue on to the next slide because I want to get to those pears, and here they are. So because there isn't enough data to be able to model these crops here, we work backwards, right? I said we do tier 3 wherever we can. If we can't do tier 3, we do tier 2. So the tier 2 model, we go back and we use the National Land Coverage Database, or the NLCD, as well as the ecoregions and the soil information. And so what we really need to know is the type of soil, the climate zone, the tillage practices, as well as the general fertilizer characteristics. And with that information for these crops here, we can go ahead and do the inventory and the quantification for those. Let's go on to the next slide. And so this is basically what I've said here is that based on this information, that's how we use the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change emissions factors to do the calculations. We're able to do both above ground and below ground carbon. So the above ground that we're focusing on are the trees. So like the hazelnut trees in this picture, that's part of what the quantification is in this part of the tool. And then we'll go on to the next slide. Actually, let's go back a slide for a second before we do the discussion questions. There are tier 1 emissions as well. Tier 1 emissions are related to organic soils. So organic soils are really, really tricky. Histosols is typically the type of soils, and there aren't really good quantification methods for that at the tier 2 or tier 3 level. And so for those, we do a very simple tier 1, which is basically number of acres times an emissions factor. So then we'll go to this next slide. And so to confirm everything that we did, we reached out to experts in the state, at OSU, and then to Dean and Andrea. And the question that we wanted to pose to you today is, are there other cropland experts that we should speak with to make sure that as we finalize the inventory, we're not missing anything or misstating anything? And with that, I see Megan has her hand up.
I'm familiar. This is so great that Dean and Andrea were able to be resource people for you, and Melissa is a great resource as well. But OSU Extension has specialists, statewide specialists in different cropping systems. So they have a orchard specialist, they have a rangeland specialist, pastureland, and I would recommend, if there are particular cropping systems that you're interested in, that you connect with their statewide specialists in those areas, and they can really fill you in on some of the details about timing of applications, timing of planting and harvest and such, if any of that is valuable. But Melissa wouldn't be she wouldn't, I don't think she has that specialization on a statewide level.
Great, thank you so much. I should have also listed in the earlier slide, we do have pulled other information from OSU, from the extension office as well. But we will definitely take another look at that and make sure we connect with them.
Megan, if you have specific people that you have in mind, it would be so great just to send those along so that we can just oh, that's matching up with who you were thinking of, and who Robert knows about or is working with or could work with. So thanks for that. Ellen?
Yeah, thank you. I would definitely say extension, including local extension, because, for instance, most of our irrigated acreage is not supporting the crops that were listed on previous slides in Jefferson County. So there's a lot of crops that you are missing, and there can still be tens of thousands of acres of those crops. And it would be good for you to talk to extension agents across the state, or to or soil and water districts, or whoever, to get a better handle on what is really getting grown.
Are there ones that jump out at you? Because what we did is we tried to pull the data from the USDA to get those, and it's the same data that the Oregon Department of Agriculture publishes. So is there something on there that you didn't see that raises concern? I want to make sure that I'm
like seed crops. Yeah, seed crops.
Okay.
Would be one thing, because that's our specialty.
Yeah.
And yes, so
okay.
I don't know how you would integrate that, but that would be one thing. And
so the largest seed crops that I'm aware of are the rye, the annual ryegrass, bentgrass, bluegrass, clover, fescue.
Okay.
Are those?
Well, I didn't see bluegrass on the list that flashed up. So that'd be one, but there's a lot of non-grass seed crops. And so I would take a look at that. And I know when I was at ODA looking at the land or the cropland database, it's very flawed.
Yeah. So the NLCD, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, National Land
or the
USDA.
One.
Yeah, that's the NLCD is a different one.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know how it looks at a lot of niche crops and things like that. But there could be lots and lots of acreage of niche crops.
Mhm.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
I'll just
And the experiment stations, not just OSU Extension, but also their experiment stations, they could really tell you what's going on around the state.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And to her point, what percent? It's like 90% of the carrot seed in the United States is grown in Jefferson County. So,
Actually, half the carrot seed planted worldwide.
okay, there you go.
Yes, it's grown in Jefferson County.
I learned so much from you guys. This is so great. This is a really great conversation. From just, I don't know, Jason and I have noted that there's a lot of, I mean, Oregon, when we join other states at the U.S. Climate Alliance trainings, and which Robert is a teacher there when we go, there's a lot of talk about specialty crops, and certain states that really do get into specialized crops, like Oregon is so diverse, right? That there is a lot to capture, and so that'll be an area of constant improvement that the state will be aiming for. So just to kind of to let you all know that, I mean, would you say that's fair, Robert and Jason?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Dean, your hand is up.
Yeah, ditto to what Ellen just said regarding, and Megan, regarding extension agents and experiment stations, ARS, Agricultural Research Station, especially, I would say the one in Umatilla County. Don Wysocki is part of that and has been there a long, long time. And so especially, I think, looking east of the Cascades, there's a whole lot of farmland east of the Cascades, and Melissa Berry and I are more kind of west of the Cascade folks. So definitely looking east of the Cascades. And I think, in terms of specialty crops, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, Oregon leads in production of certain crops, but it doesn't add up to maybe a huge amount of acres. And you might just decide that those are rabbit holes you don't necessarily want to go down, even though they're very important economically in terms of acres of impact on greenhouse gases. Maybe not so much. And one example there is nursery crops. That's the number one crop in terms of money in the state. Not a whole lot of acres, and there's so much diversity in the way nursery crops are grown. I'm not sure it's worth your time to try to model those kinds of things, or look up, or well, you're not going to be able to model them with Comet, but to even try to find data on that for like the tier 1 or tier 2 things. And yeah, Robert, let me know if you want any more input on stuff. I reached out to a bunch of NRCS folks. Some said that they'd be available because they often have, especially east of the Cascades, they have experience running the revised universal soil loss equation, Russell, which is, as you know, pretty similar input wise to Comet. So right now those guys are not available, but hopefully sometime in the near future they'll be back to work. But let me know if you want to talk anymore. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your previous help. I think the one thing that we are still working on is making sure, at some level, for to be able to complete this project on time and on budget, is we're trying to go down as far as we can in the list of croplands. But I don't want to like have an arbitrary cutoff. At some level, what we're thinking about and trying to figure out is how do we look at can we, at a certain level, can we consider something croplands and then do an emissions factor associated with it? So we're not just ignoring it and saying, oh, no, if it's less than X number of acres, we can't consider it. But be able to consider that and do it at least so we get some level of information on it. The other thing is about this project, and I think you may have heard this before, we have a whole section on future improvements, right? And so we're going to do as much as we can. We're trying to build the infrastructure for this so that then it can go deeper and broader out in the future. And that's what's really exciting about this. We're really trying to help make sure we get enough things put together and put it in the hands of ODO so that they can then take it and go further and deeper as the years go on. And when you go and look at our technical manual that we've got, I want to say we're over 120 pages right now. So it gives you an idea of the level of detail that it's going into.
Oh, I just had anxiety with that number. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I would like to add from a kind of a state resources point of view that, Dean, your point taken about like, hey, you might decide not to model something. It is true that deciding to model something may mean that the state would need to have resources in order to develop a model for it. So relying on existing models is really, really important as far as like a resource consideration. And so there will be a lot of recommendations in the improvement plan that we will have to kind of prioritize as far as like, what do we have resources to do and what kind of model, can we invest in right now? And so your point is a good one. I know the project team has counseled Jason and I while we're doing the project of like, well, you want to find that sweet spot where it's like, you don't want to model yourself to death. There will be diminishing returns at some point. And so there's a point, a nice sweet point where you're getting accurate information that is very accurate. And yes, maybe there's 2, 5, 10% left that you could reach for, but the costs outweigh the benefits. So just to know that conversation is going on and will continue to go on for the life of this program. Thanks everyone for those questions. Okay.
All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. I think that takes us into the grasslands and rangelands. So I'm going to actually stop here and I'm going to kick it over to Anoop. What I'll say in the lead up of this is that a lot of what you'll see here on the slides from the grasslands and rangeland is going to be similar with croplands, but I'm just focused on the soil on this part. Anoop is focused on everything that's growing above ground. And so with that, let me turn it over to Anoop, and then he and I will tag team throughout the rest of this presentation. Anoop, it's all yours.
Thank you, Robert. So the grassland data I'll be presenting is above ground from the biomass carbon side. So for this, again, all our whole inventory, land-based inventory, is based on NLCD data. And then soil type data is again Sargo database, and we are using Forest Service inventory analysis plot, or FIA plots for getting our carbon densities for the shrublands. And so again, this data set is pretty much the same as I presented it earlier in the forestry side. And the activity data is acres of grassland, soil types, and agronomic practices. And it's again, the source identified is a NLCD database. And for the grassland side, for the biomass carbon, we're again, depending on the FIA database, to get the carbon densities for shrub and scrub types. And may I have a next slide, please? Yeah. Okay, so for the grassland type, NLCD classes are shrub and scrub, and grassland herbaceous layers. So again, for the shrub and scrub, we go to the FIA database and get the carbon densities for above ground biomass and below ground biomass. And for the grass and herbaceous layer, FIA database doesn't cover it. So what we did is we went to rangeland analysis platform, RCMap, and from there we choose the herbaceous biomass for the perennial crops only, because in accounting, the annual crops, annual grasses are, whatever the carbon stock they absorb from atmosphere is released at the end of the growing season. So what we did is we looked for perennial forbs and grasses. That's the category in there. So what do we, then I went into their model on net primary production to track the above ground biomass, and then derive the biomass carbon densities for the perennial grass and forbs. And the NPP database or the RA rangeland analysis platform doesn't have a below ground biomass. So we're going to use a root suit ratio on IPCC guidelines to get the below ground biomass. May I have the next slide, please? I think at this point, I have to hand it over to the Robert.
So this is, you've seen most of this before. The difference between grasslands and rangelands and croplands is just the information that is in there. So we're looking at grazing days, amount of utilization of the grazing, rest periods, if it is a managed land, whether there is planting and harvesting, if you're planting something for say for a pasture-based system, we include that in it. So it's a simplified version because you don't have as many cropping types, you don't have rotations as often. Sometimes it's just you've got regular grasslands you're using on out into the future. And so if you go on to the next slide, you'll see the information. So it's again, this is exactly what I just said on the soil carbon, and we'll go to the slide after that and kick it right back to Anoop.
Sorry. Okay, from the NLCD, there are two grassland categories or classes. They have the scrub subtype and grassland herbaceous. So for easy to track those, we call it subtype. For scrub subtype, carbon densities will be derived from forest inventory and analysis plus for above ground biomass pool and below ground biomass pool. And for grass herbaceous subtype, carbon densities will be derived only for the perennial forbs and grass from rangeland analysis platform. So above ground biomass. And I think as I mentioned earlier, for the grasslands, for the grassland and herbaceous, we only track down for the perennial forests and grassland. Next slide. I think it goes to Robert now.
Yeah, so as we said before, to double check our information, we talked to Randy Wiest of the Oregon Department of State Lands to make sure we had the basic information there. And the question back to all of you is, are there other folks that Anoop or I should be talking about to make sure that we have the right assumptions and the right data in developing the inventory?
Ben, you had an offering in the chat.
Okay.
It wasn't so much a person to talk to, but just looking at the LEMA data that FIA plot densities aren't great. And so LEMA has improved upon the FIA with some remote sensing data, and it covers all of Oregon. And they do have pretty good like scrub in addition to forest data. So I'm sure that the folks at Oregon State who put it together would be happy to talk as well.
Thank you, Ben. I'll look at that and we'll connect.
Looks like Mike has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you have people included from the experiment station in Burns, the Rangeland Experiment Station in Burns?
Not yet, but I see you dropped their names in there. So that's part of the reason for this call today.
Somebody else dropped them in there, which is good. Yeah, thank you.
That would be Ellen.
I'm sorry, my apologies. I saw the names and didn't scroll up to see the who put it in there. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions? Oh, David offers. David, would you like to come off mute or speak to your comment?
Sure, yeah. I'm not sure if that's a good suggestion or not, but I just wanted to throw it out there. We have the largest Pacific Northwest intact grassland left, and it used to be quite an extensive system. And so it's quite unique and attracts some really unique minds working there. They study a lot the impacts of grazing, different types of grazing methodologies on the grassland there. And I know Mike, who I brought up in the chat, he's also worked overseas on grasslands, I think in Mongolia. He's nearing retirement, and just a wealth of knowledge. They've kept him on it part-time to help him transition, to help train some of the new staff. So not exactly sure what you'd want to be getting at with him, but I just wanted to throw it out there as a very unique grassland type in Eastern Oregon, where you may be able to get some unique insights. There's been quite a bit of research done on the Zumwalt Prairie. And and lastly, the Prairie Preserve itself is about 33,000 acres, but the Zumwalt as a grassland system is about 330,000 acres. And so the preserve is about 10% of the entire kind of system here in Wallowa County.
Fantastic. And I see lots of other stuff in the chat as well. So thank you, Catherine, and everyone, Dean, for all of your comments as well. This is a wealth of information.
Megan?
We also saw that grassland and pasture land were combined, and I'm wondering if you need any resources for pasture land.
We'd love to have any on pasture land if you've got them. So if you've got some people for us to talk to, yeah, we'd love to have it. Make sure we understand the full systems and make sure we've got the right crops and right practices in there, grazing practices as well. So if you've got a name or a contact there, please send it our way.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Any other hands? Gosh, thank you, everyone. Okay, I don't see any new chats.
And I think if we go on to the next slide, that's the end for us. So we'll turn it back to you, Liz and Olga.
Wow, you guys, we're so ahead of schedule. This is great. Really helpful presentation today, everyone, and really helpful information and questions. You've given us a lot of things to work on and also leads to chase. So thank you from all of us. Chair, is without further ado, I mean, there's plenty of time to kind of just open the conversation and acknowledge the cool executive order that that was published yesterday, to just see if the group has any reflections on that or questions for us. Just wanted to
maybe just open it up on the inventory first, and then go.
Yeah, let's wrap up the inventory. Are there any remaining discussion questions?
Thinking back to the wetlands and the forests, are there any other questions that came for folks?
I should probably also add next steps, meaning like the team is going to be working like mad to continue to refine their methodologies, and it will result in that all written down, of course. And this group, as well as the public, will have a chance to review the methodologies as written, right, in a document. So thank you for, this has all kind of been preliminary discussions. Like, here are some draft methodologies, and this is where we're headed based on what data is available and what we've learned. But it all needs to come together. And so that will be the next step. It will occur a little bit rapidly through November and December. But just wanted to let you know about that. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. Project team, would you like to say anything and wrap up?
Just thank you all for your input. It's much appreciated. I think, we tend to work in our little lanes and stay very technical, but it always helps to make sure that what we're doing makes sense to the world, the rest of the world. And so, yeah, we are grateful for your engagement in this, and appreciate your input.
Okay. Thank you, guys. So, Kathy, did you want to open up, just say some things about the executive order?
Yeah, it's just to acknowledge that yesterday the Governor Kotek enacted a new executive order, largely focused on climate resilience, but also including the role of natural and working lands as a climate action strategy and an opportunity to increase removals from the atmosphere and reduce emissions from alteration of natural and working lands. So it's exciting to see that coming out. I think lots more to be determined about exactly how that intersects with the work that this group of people are doing. But it was great to see that the Climate Action Commission was identified as part of that discussion. And I know that that staff at Odo will be heavily engaged in trying to help guide how we can get at resilience and increased net sequestration in combination. So exciting to see that come out, and that the governor is paying attention to natural resources in the land sector. And I don't know that we can answer a lot of questions, but would love to take any questions that are there. And if there are ones we can answer, we'll try. And otherwise, we'll catalog those and try and get answers as we go.
Very true. Thank you, Kathy. Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I made reference to it earlier, but what I'm seeing is that some of the agencies are kind of at cross purposes in terms of climate work. And it's very disturbing to me, one who's on the ground and on the farmland. We're covering up things with data centers at a very rapid rate. And more disturbing to me is the number of commercial uses we're now allowing on farmland, which is covering up farmland at a very rapid rate. And Department of Land Conservation is working to expand uses on farmland that will probably negate all the work of the Oregon climate groups because of the additional travel and transportation that will go to the farm zone. So I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot a lot of ways in how we're trying to protect farmland for eventual climate work. We're undoing it as fast as we're trying to do it. So it's very disturbing to me for someone who has tried to save the Hood River Valley for farmland for 45 years, and we're losing rapidly to tourism and other uses and probably eventually we won't be sequestering carbon.
Thank you for that reflection, Mike.
Liz, do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, jump in. Yeah.
Mike, DLCD and Oregon Department of Forestry have done kind of an assessment of loss of ag and forest lands in Oregon. Be interested maybe offline in your reflections on the adequacy of that analysis that's been done on kind of the overall losses, because my impression, but I am not an expert on this, is that it kind of looks at it in an aggregate, but maybe doesn't look at some of the within farm modifications that happen relative to other uses. So maybe that's a good conversation for us to have offline.
Okay, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Lauren?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I had a question that I don't know if if you can answer, but the EO speaks specifically to this interagency team, and I guess it's a little confusing to me. So the executive director of OWEB and the executive director of ODF&W, it sounds like, will be leading that, but then they'll be collaborating with ODO, and then the Natural Working Lands Program is listed. So I was kind of curious, the way it's written is like, who's all part of that interagency team and what does collaboration mean? And maybe that's still being figured out, but.
Yeah, I think everyone is aware that this group and 7 agencies with ODO and the commission are on figuring this part out, standing up these accounting systems for carbon, working on natural climate solutions together and metrics and in conjunction with those agencies. And so how exactly it'll all be woven together is still being figured out. And the EO kind of suggests that, like, we're going to figure this out, but here's who's involved. So I think we'll have to circle back on that once we have more discussions and once they kind of maybe kick off that work.
And just to recognize that while I think natural climate solutions will be well integrated into that, the executive order does cover resilience and adaptation a little more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another piece that needs to kind of be defined, what the sideboards are in that discussion and how it would be approached.
Yeah, I think one complementary aspect really of the group that will convene in the EO is that this work doesn't really include a discussion about where NCS might be applied or where we should put NCS. And I know that the group in is that the EO and climate resiliency is asking that question, like, where do we put things to be most resilient? And so in that way, it's really complementary work and exciting.
I just wanted to mention that the legislature did not fund the Natural and Working Lands Fund in this legislative session. So executive orders are fine, but they also need to get funded. And if there continue to be other priorities such as housing and stuff like that, there's a lot of conversation among agencies, but in order to get stuff happening, it also needs to get funded. Hopefully this will encourage funding. I don't know.
Ellen, I'll just note that at least the governor included a funding for the Natural and Working Lands Fund. Well, I agree with you. It was disappointing that the legislature didn't approve that. I think the executive order can continue to signal that it's important for the governor. So
yeah,
need to continue. There are a lot of competing needs, as you identified, and we need to continue to figure out how to best advance this in light of those things. And I think the executive order will be a really important touchstone for that, in my individual humble opinion.
Jocelyn?
Yeah, I guess on that note, the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program also, could use funding to protect agricultural lands. Oh, I'm getting echo. But it would just be great to see that. I saw in the executive order, we want to protect 10% more of our working lands. So that is one mechanism, and would love to see Oregon take a leadership role on that and, frankly, catch up with many other states that are really multiplying federal funding and getting voluntary easements on agricultural lands. Echoing Mike's comment previously.
Kathy, you're muted. Thank you for that comment, Jocelyn.
Thank you. Jocelyn, if you have other states you think we should highlight to the commission in terms of the kind of work that they're doing on agricultural lands, it'd be great to hear. The commission does want to identify things that are happening elsewhere that are things we should be modeling. And I know there are some good things happening in some other states, but I'd love to hear any thoughts you have, and so feel free to send Liz or I an email with other states you think we should, and people from those states you think we should be highlighting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions coming to mind? I'm checking the chat.
Do you want to preview what's coming next at our next meeting?
Oh yeah, good idea. Let's do that. Because it will be it'll be kind of fast paced. So this team and the workforce team will be presenting their draft findings to you in the November meeting. And then quickly following will be public comment periods and public webinars for that work as well, being swiftly wrapped into some final reports that will be sent to the legislature December 31st. And so really well, there's an open line of communication, of course, in these meetings and to our emails always for this group, and do encourage you all to also participate in the public comment period as well. That would be fabulous. I had mentioned, we'll be sending you the draft methodologies, if you are draft technical manual for the inventory work prior to the, if possible. The timeline is really they're very close together, and it's a short timeline. So if possible, we'll be sending you that draft technical manual previous to the public comment. And even if we're, I just want to say here, like, even if you're going to have great comments, no doubt. And even if we're unable to make the change in this iteration of the inventory, we are like sponges collecting all sorts of recommendations and actions and methods, data that we should be considering as we improve the inventory. This is a living tool for the state, and we're obligated to update it every other year right now. And so we'll be already working on our obligation to meet that requirement by the end of 2026. So this is kind of like a first go, and just wanted to remind you all while you're reviewing the forthcoming documents. Is there anything else on your mind, Kathy?
Yeah, I thought maybe just a high level overview of what's next in terms of the activity and community-based metrics.
Oh, right. So we did, I just saw in my email that we did finalize the contract for our third contractor, which will be RTI, which is a consultant that is very versed and on the national and international stage for nature-based solutions and natural climate solutions. I'm really lucky to have them. The project spans, social information that we need to gather, as well as carbon information and, the activities that are occurring on the ground in natural climate solutions. And so building on the good work of INR, we'll, start that work in they'll start their work immediately to start, coalescing the information on existing agency programs and the practices that have, were recommended by ANR, and engagement in earnest, since this group does not meet in December because holidays. This group will start on that work in earnest in January.
What does RTI stand for if it's
Oh,
not easily
That's
Googleable?
a very good question.
Called
because
Research Triangle International, I want to say.
Thank you.
I think so.
Oh, and now he gives a thumbs up.
Resource Triangle International, is that what you said?
Yes.
Institute.
Oh, Institute. I'm sorry. Research Triangle Institute International. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Any questions on that from folks? We touched on, I thought the conversation or the description of the tiers was super helpful. And, at our last meeting, we kind of touched on, well, wait a minute, we're doing an inventory and then we've got this activities work. And I think that tiers description was really helpful for explaining that activities are kind of included in both, perhaps differently in both, but there's probably some overlap too. So more to come on that, but I thought that staff did a really great job of kind of helping create that deeper level of understanding of how we're looking at the inventory. And then, that hopefully clarified some of the questions that came up about the next step of the activity-based metrics. So thank you to staff for the great description, and also to the consultants for really a great presentation today that I think helped us get our heads around the work that's being done. So nice job, everyone. And thanks to all of you for your time and attention and the great questions that you're asking. It's going to make this a much stronger product in the end. So thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. And thanks, everyone. Just checking the hands one more time. Don't see any. And with that, about 15 minutes of your day back to you. Thank you so much for all the great input today. Have a good Friday.
Thank you.